Death is coming for our family.
I said, oh, 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 oh,
The launch of the Skyview restaurant in 1968 is attended by young Iris and her fiancé Paul. With an engagement ring on her finger, Paul proposed to Iris. Iris noticed something horrifying at that same time. A penny had been thrown down by a boy above. The coin appeared to have been directed straight into a ventilation shaft by the blow of death itself. The fan was immediately stopped when the coin became lodged in it. People dancing joyfully inside the tower were oblivious to the rapidly expanding glass breaks beneath their feet. The metal supports underneath broke as Iris and Paul shifted into place. One by one, bolts came loose. Suddenly, a fan blade was broken by the stuck coin and it flew directly into a gas line. Cracks grew wider and gas started to seep into the air as the dancers went on. Iris was uneasy about everything. Paul abruptly collapsed through the floor. One by one, people started to fall while frantically clinging to metal beams. Ground crew terrified down and fled for their life. Paul was able to seize a piece of sturdy glass. Iris cried out for assistance, but nobody arrived. Despite her desperate attempts to reach Paul, he slipped and fell. As frightened individuals attempted to flee, chaos broke out. A huge explosion was immediately caused when a woman who was enveloped in flames dashed into the gas leak. Those that were unable to run quickly enough did not make it. Iris almost avoided the fire. Employees yelled for everyone to leave right away. The youngster who tossed the coin took the lead and ran ahead. Although the terrified crowd hurried to the emergency escape, death had also prepared this. When the walkway collapsed, everyone within was killed. Fortunately, the boy was uninjured. The surviving individuals hurried to the elevator, forcefully shoving one another to stay alive. An elderly man pushed Iris away, but became trapped in the jammed elevator doors. When the overcrowded elevator broke down, the elderly guy was severely crushed. Although Iris tried to find another way out, the stress had an adverse effect on her pregnancy. Suddenly, she saw everything moving sideways and the ceiling start to break menacingly. Sensing catastrophe, she hurried to the top. Others weren't as fortunate. A steep slope was created when the floor split in half. Uncontrollably, people fell and hit the reinforced glass. When the woman looked up, she saw a piano teetering perilously, but she had assumed she had survived. Once more, death stepped in and dropped a coin onto the piano, causing it to tumble down on the unfortunate woman. All of the members of that group had now fallen. With a sly smile, the lad fled before the piano fell on him. Iris grieved over Paul, but she put everything on the line to save another youngster who was in danger. The building above fully collapsed at the same time. At the very last moment, Iris managed to hold on to a metal object. However, a closer look revealed that her hand was not the one that had saved her. Paul's engagement ring was fastened to a steel rod. The brittle grip was short-lived, and Iris fell into the inferno below in the next instant. During class, Stephanie awoke from a nightmare. However, it wasn't your typical nightmare. She had the same dream for 2 months in a row. Stephanie discussed it with her roommate. A woman with the name of her grandmother, Iris, appeared in the dream. However, Stephanie was unaware of Iris's existence and had never met her. In the hopes that the nightmares would end, her roommate advised her to go home and learn more. Stephanie asked her father, Marty, about Iris when she got home. Marty scowled a little, but his odd smile was obviously concealing something. Charlie, Stefan's younger brother, announced that he was going to see their relatives at that same moment. Stefani made the decision to accompany. Marty advised them not to bring up Iris with their family members before they departed. Stefani became even more suspicious as a result. What actually transpired with Iris? Where did Iris's mother come from if she was the woman in the dream and anything negative had occurred? Stefani went straight to her Uncle Howard as she and Charlie arrived at their cousin's place. She wanted to inquire about Darlene, her mother. Howard abruptly shifted the subject because he was surprised. However, Howard and his wife Brenda were clearly taken aback when Stefani brought up the location of the Skyview restaurant, which was the subject of her visions. Stefani asked them questions. Inquiring to find out more, her cousins joined in. At last, they disclosed that Iris was still alive. She had experienced a mental collapse. However, Iris was as good as death to Howard and Brenda. In an attempt to put a stop to her dreams, Stephanie wanted to speak with Iris directly. Howard, frustrated, clarified that Iris lost control following the death of their father. She confined them home, prevented them from attending school, and lived in continual worry that her kids would pass away. Iris was eventually taken away by the police after they interfered. Later, Iris continued to constantly monitor the development of their foster care. Iris began sending Howard and Brenda ominous messages when they had their own kids, Bobby, Julia, and Eric. These letters were filled with warnings and gruesome photos of dead bodies. They eventually moved away, cutting all contact with Iris. Stephanie asked to see those letters, but Howard and Brenda refused. After much pleading, Brenda secretly told her where the letters were hidden. Stephanie found the letters, and what she saw shocked her. The woman in the photos matched her dream exactly. This meant the dreams were probably true. Determined to find answers, Stephanie drove alone to search for Iris. Following the address, she ended up at a remote mountain hideout. She spoke with Iris via an intercom at the door, and Iris urged her to leave right away. However, after Stephanie revealed that she was Iris's granddaughter, Iris insisted that she empty her pockets before entering. The heavy door opened, and Stephanie cautiously entered the house, which was full of odd obstacles, including spikes covering the roof, which Iris explained was all for protection against invisible threats. As Stephanie moved slowly forward, Iris anxiously gave her the order to quickly close the door. Suddenly, a fire extinguisher fell outside, and she cautioned Stephanie not to touch anything, as anything could be a deadly trap. When she finally saw her granddaughter, Iris smiled warmly and inquired about Stephane's mother, Darlene. Stephanie clarified that she had not known Darlene's current condition because she had been away from her mother since she was 10 years old. Stephanie began to inquire about the nightmare. It wasn't simply a dream, Iris informed her. At one point, she experienced visions of the future. She anticipated catastrophe. She and Paul were on the tallest rooftop at the time. A child attempted to throw a coin, but security intervened, and a woman's hat flew off. But the youngster was adamant about throwing it. Paul was on the verge of popping the question to her. Iris forewarned Paul right away that the building would collapse, everyone would die. Paul appeared perplexed, so Iris hurried to take the coin from the boy's hand. She then got the crucial item that would set off the butterfly effect, hurried downstairs, grabbed the burning pot, and discovered that people were dancing inside. Since it was too risky to go outside, Iris advised Stephanie to stay and learn the fundamentals. Even though Iris hadn't gone out in 20 years, Stephanie wasn't interested in staying. It was time for her to go back to school. Stephanie believed Iris's warning that their family would soon die was a dream. She wasn't credible. She didn't hesitate to leave. Ahead of her departure, Iris pleaded with her to take the book. Iris had a vision as Stephanie was ready to leave the house. Trigger items, the compass, and the wind. She was aware that going outside would result in her death. However, Stephanie chose to take the chance. She went outside nevertheless, said that the book could shield the family, and threw it into Stephanie's arms. However, Stephanie continued to doubt her, so Iris advised her to back off. She would prove it was all real. A burst of wind blew in abruptly. It caused the compass to topple over. A fire extinguisher was struck. As it soared, the extinguisher pierced Iris's mouth. Stephanie finally thought Iris was gone at this point. The funeral was attended by her family. Iris had predicted death. Stephanie informed her father and uncle, but they didn't think she was telling the truth. Darlene, Stephane's mother, arrived at that very moment, still furious with her mother. Stephanie turned to go. She began reading the book Iris had given her when she got home. The rest of the family, utterly ignorant, was enjoying a barbecue, eating, and laughing at Howard's house. Death was here. Bobby broke a glass by accident, but he was unaware that the shard had gotten mixed up with the ice cubes. Next to a gas tank, Eric set his drink. They were obviously on the verge of becoming Death's new instruments. They unintentionally used the glass shards on the ice after everyone had assembled to eat and drink. Howard threw up a glass. Then Darlene's glass was captured by the camera. Did she own it? Sensing that something was amiss, Stephanie called her brother Charlie and made her way to Howard's house. Regretfully, he didn't answer. The trampoline was on the verge of breaking due to loose stitching. Stephanie noticed a warning sign while traveling. There is danger ahead. Death itself seemed to be attempting to stop her. The glass fragment was then seen in her father Marty's drink, but he only took a tiny sip before setting it aside. Howard approached the trampoline to jump on it. It appeared as though the surface might collapse at any moment. Darlene was fortunate to find the concealed rake. With a cry, she hurried over, took it out, and put it back in the shed. Brenda, however, unintentionally knocked down a bottle right then. It pressed a switch on a machine close by. Below, the pipes started to tremble and twist. The identical rake from before began to descend. Death was prepared to start its show when Stefani got there. Howard approached her to say hello. Bobby's leg unexpectedly became lodged in the trampoline. As Julia looked back, a piece of glass fell out of her cup. Howard trodden on the fragment. A sudden, piercing pain struck him. The rake landed on the lawnmower at that same moment. Howard fell after losing his footing. He was killed by the mower, which came charging directly at him. The family members went to another funeral. Stefani hurried home to review the books once more. She discovered a message that read, "JB discovered a survivor." She started speculating about who may come next. Howard and Darlene were the offspring of Iris and Paul. Bobby, Julia, and Eric were Howard's kids. Stefani and Charlie were Darlene's kids. They were all bound together by blood and were unable to avoid dying. Stefani gave the others an explanation of the pattern. They sat silently and listened now. It was all from the death list of the restaurant. Iris had observed the same order of death. Hundreds should have perished at first, but Iris saved them. Death was now returning to take them one by one. When it came to killing, death had a set sequence. It began with Howard's family before going on to Stefani's. Brenda and Marty were probably off the death list because they were not blood relatives. This meant that Eric, Howard's eldest son, was now the one most in risk. But Stefani was not taken seriously. Every one of them believed she was cursed or obsessed. They then started to leave one by one. Eric reached his place of employment. A hanging chain brushed across a revolving fan. Beside Eric, the chain was a perfect fit for his nose ring. A spill of disinfectant hit the floor. The chain was drawn tighter and tighter as the fan continued to whirl slowly. The nose ring would not come off Eric's nose. Standing on his tiptoes and balancing higher and higher was necessary. Unintentionally, he ran into a nearby lamp. When the light collapsed, the flammable disinfectant was instantaneously ignited. Things rapidly deteriorated. The glass on the table broke. In agony and panic, Eric was frantically attempting to break free. He was able to take the chain off at the last second, but he knocked over more disinfectant as he landed. The shop burst a few moments later. Stefani, meanwhile, had been concerned. All night long, Eric had not returned her calls. After grabbing Charlie, she hurried outside to find him. They almost had an accident on the way. Fortunately, Eric was still alive. Stefani became even more certain that death was after them after he managed to flee by ripping off his flaming leather gear. But Eric continued to not believe a word of it. Stephanie made the decision to stick by him in order to keep him safe. In an attempt to stop any potential chain reaction, she started to follow Iris's instructions. A tree trimmer, for instance, abruptly fell from a neighboring limb and nearly struck a boy's soccer ball, which may have hit Eric's skull. They encountered Julia, who was jogging at that same moment. One of the garbage trucks drove by. Despite Stephanie's prompt warning to keep away, Eric began acting carelessly and making goofy expressions close to the truck. Ignoring them, Julia put on her headphones and continued to run. Nobody anticipated the subsequent events. Julia ended up in the garbage truck by accident. The driver was wearing headphones and was unable to hear anything as they chased after it in shock. Stephanie managed to clutch Julia's hand as she leapt into the truck, but it was too late. The calculator crushed Julia. At that point, the remainder of the family knew they were indeed going to die. Brenda then disclosed a startling reality. Howard's biological son was not Eric. Her affair resulted in him. That could be the reason Eric lived, meaning Howard's younger son, Bobby, was the next in line for harm. A name from the notes came back to Stefani. It just so happened that William and Darlene knew him. To find him, they hurried to the hospital. It turns out that the youngster Iris saved that night long ago was William. William clarified that there were just two methods to avoid dying: either die and return, or murder someone to replace them. He informed them that, like Iris, he was now ill. He was nearly out of time. He forewarned that they would all ultimately perish in the precise order specified. Although it sounded awful, the reality was worse. William cautioned them, "Do not interfere too much with death's design, because if they failed, things could become even more tragic." He told them to make the most of their remaining time. Then he left in silence. Eric reasoned that the simplest method to save Bobby would be to die and then resurrect. In an attempt to cause a severe allergic response so that medical professionals might save Bobby from certain death, Eric advised him to consume some peanut snacks. The peanuts became lodged within the bag of peanuts they purchased from the vending machine. Frustrated, Eric smashed the glass to get them out. Together, they even raised the entire machine. They eventually obtained the peanuts after some effort. After entering the adjacent room, they unintentionally turned on the MRI scanner. A powerful magnetic force started pulling everything metal. Eric tore his body piercings in the direction of the machine. He even had a wheelchair fly forward behind him. Eric was violently smashed into the MRI machine. Bobby, who had just consumed the peanuts, was completely powerless to assist. He attempted to grab the EpiPen that Eric was holding. A doctor opened the door after noticing the disturbance. Then the terrible moment arrived. Bobby's head was pierced by a loose spring from the vending machine that flew across the room. Charlie, Darlene, and Stefani clung to one another. They chose to choose Iris's route and risk everything after realizing they could no longer resist death. To get to Iris's former cabin, the three of them traveled far into the mountains. They were unaware that a coin had dropped out of the book. It was scooped up off the ground by an elderly woman. The lodge in the mountains felt eerie, like if death had already been waiting for them. Stephanie drove directly into the cabin after slamming the gas pedal. She was locked in position by her seatbelt clasp when the automobile crashed halfway through. Darlene was now death's objective. Everyone else might be okay as long as she managed to get inside the cabin, but nobody saw the sparks emanating from a roof wire that had been shorted. A massive explosion struck the car as Darlene got to the cabin door. Stefan's body fell into a pond close by. Wooden boards pinned Charlie to the ground. Darlene crawled over and rescued Charlie, who was hurt and struggling. She urged him to act fast to save Stefani. She was instantly slain when a light post fell from the sky shortly after she stated that. Charlie hurried to extract Stefani. She wasn't conscious. Fortunately, he was able to save her life in time. The two laughed and gave each other hugs. William must have meant to die and return in this way. Stefani, however, couldn't contain her tears when she learned of Darlene's passing. The only members of Iris's bloodline remaining were her and Charlie. Charlie and Stefani went to his girlfriend's place a week later. Stefani got stung by a rose thorn while mending Charlie's clothing. She suddenly recalled the nightmare. Iris had also pricked her finger in that dream. A penny was then dropped by an elderly woman. It became trapped between the railroad tracks after rolling down the stairs. A train was hurtling in its direction. The father of Charlie's girlfriend worked as a doctor. He clarified that Stefani hadn't actually died when he learned how Charlie had saved her. If someone revives your breathing when you're unconscious, your heart won't stop. Then, he continued nonchalantly, you weren't actually dead. But that didn't sound good to Stefani and Charlie. As in her dream, Stephanie saw a crimson automobile. In fact, Charlie's girlfriend was dressed exactly like Iris. Her unhappiness intensified. The train then went off course. There was a crash. They were directly in the path of the train. Stefani fell after tripping. Charlie seized her and hauled her to her feet. They had not escaped, despite the appearance that they had, and the movie ends here. To ensure you never miss any updates on new videos, kindly click the bell icon and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.